Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
When I was a kid, I loved makeup. I loved it. The first time I saw a MAC store, I almost passed out. I just couldn't believe that there was a place in the world where makeup was the center of attention. And there were all these people, and their whole job was just to make people feel beautiful and have these amazing makeup looks and artistry. So I told my parents probably around when I was 13 or 14 years old that I wanted to be a makeup artist. And they told me that I couldn't be a makeup artist, that I could never be successful and financially stable being a makeup artist. And jokes on them, because probably if I was, I would be an Instagram famous makeup artist and be making millions of dollars. So thanks, mom and dad, for that. But we still sort of landed in the right place.
Hmm. So, for people who don't know what you do today, can you share a little bit about your role?
Yes, so I am the executive director of integrated marketing at Too Faced Cosmetics. It is one of the biggest prestige makeup brands in America. If you haven't heard of it, go to your local Sephora or Ulta and you can see all of our most famous products. But I have been working in beauty for the past 5 years. So
Mm.
before I was in this role, I was in a couple of different other roles at the Estée Lauder Companies, and I absolutely adore it. Today, my job consists of helping bring our products to market from conception all the way to when it hits the stores, and everything you see on social media and TikTok, Instagram, etc. That's part of my job too. So it's really a blast, and I absolutely adore it. I never feel like I'm working. I just get to play with makeup all day and talk about what we think people would love and what's new, different, exciting to hit the market.
Mm. That's so amazing. And part of the reason that I wanted to have you on the podcast, Rachel, is because you pivoted. So you weren't always in this industry at Estee Lauder. Prior to that, you were in a completely different industry, doing different work, and you were very intentional about making that pivot. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about that?
Sure, absolutely. When I graduated college, I started out in management consulting. I majored in economics, and my parents wanted me to have a super stable, support myself kind of career. And so I went into consulting with Accenture, and I did that for the first 7 years of my career. I was in our financial services industry.
Mm.
I was doing process design and org design and change management and every consulting buzzword you could ever imagine. I was doing all of those things. I was doing it specifically for capital markets companies in the financial services sector. And I enjoyed it at the beginning because I've always loved solving problems. That's always been something that I've enjoyed doing. And we could even start before consulting. But before
Hmm.
I was at Accenture, I interned for the summer actually at Juicy Couture.
Ah,
I know,
I didn't know that.
what's old is new again. Now everyone loves Juicy again, which is just so funny. We actually just brought a bunch of their stuff into Too Faced for an influencer trip, so it's just wild to see those things come full circle. But I started there as an intern, and at the time they were going through a lot of reorg and a lot of change, and they really were having a lot of issues being efficient. So from that role, I said, I think I really want to be the person who solves the problems, not the person who is sitting there experiencing the problems. So that
Mm.
sort of lent itself to consulting. And that's what I was doing for a long time. I was being that person who was thinking about things critically and strategically and problem solving, which was great. And then it was amazing, amazing skill set to build. They basically just throw you at problems
Mm.
and expect you to solve them. So
Mm.
you really just become this jack of all trades who can just sort of get put in any situation in a company and sort of try to figure out what might be the best way to solve the problem. So from a skill set perspective, that was amazing. I still to this day draw on those skills and just that
Mm.
ability to be flexible, be agile in the moment and not let one specific problem that might blow up that you weren't expecting just throw you for a loop, just like be able to look at things and work through it. That still is with me to this day. But like I mentioned, I was in financial services, which was absolutely not my passion. And I sat down with myself one day, I think either right before or right after I got married, and was like, I'm going to be doing this working thing for a long time. And if
Mm.
this is going to be sustainable, I better start doing it in an industry that I'm excited about, which is not financial services. So I sort of came back to that idea of always loving beauty and being interested in beauty. And I thought, I have this great skill set. I can solve problems. I can look at a business situation and try to figure out what's the right direction to go. And I love beauty. So why wouldn't someone in the beauty industry be interested in hiring me? Because
Mm.
once I'm there, I can prove to them that I can figure it out. So that was a hard book to sell, for lack of a better
I was going to say, was that
term.
difficult to?
Yeah. And from my perspective, it sounded so obvious. It sounded so great. And I actually think that today, this is now 5 years after I've been in the industry, I actually think today that actually is a lot more of the mindset of people hiring smart, someone capable, someone with a good baseline set of skills, I think is teachable. And I think it is getting recognized more in the industry more and more, especially as things just move faster and just a more well-rounded business acumen is required to be successful. But then that wasn't necessarily the case. So I interviewed with a lot of small beauty brands and no one really understood what to do with my skill set. They were like, but do you have beauty experience? And I said, well, no, I've been in management consulting my entire career, but I love beauty. I follow beauty. I read about it. I participated in it as a consumer. I have my finger on the pulse. And so if you'll let me apply my skills to my passion for beauty, I think you'll see that I could be quite good at this job for you. And no one really got that. I shouldn't say they didn't get it. We had good conversations, but at the end of the day, I was always getting beat out by someone who had beauty experience.
I just wanted to pause you there and ask, was that discouraging for you? Or were you just sure that it would be a numbers game throughout that process? Did you ever think, well, maybe I should go find a job that neatly lines up with my consulting experience?
Yeah, so it was discouraging. I think there were a couple of things that I was thinking. Number one, at that point, I hated my job so much that staying was not an option. Like, so if anyone's ever been in that position in a job, which many people have, at that point, it's kind of like do or die. So even if you are sort of hitting a wall, you just keep going because, well, I can't say what I'm doing. And at some point, if you need to pivot that search, by all means, but I couldn't stay. So I had to keep looking and I was very passionate about the beauty thing. And then on the side, I was like, while I'm looking for this job, I'm going to do stuff in beauty that makes me happy. I was posting on Instagram all the time about my beauty routine. I had this Google spreadsheet that like 100 people asked me for with my skincare routine, makeup routine, all my favorite products. So as I was still doing this job search, which was difficult, I still felt like I was using my energy towards my passion. Whether or not that was something that was actually driving me towards my career, who's to say? But it was still keeping me relevant on what was going on in the industry, keeping me in the conversation, making me continue to deepen my knowledge. So while I was doing that search, I was also still fulfilling that passion and getting that satisfaction out of my excitement and passion for the industry. So that was something I did on the side while I was looking for the job. And to your point, had I not ended up getting an opportunity, maybe I would have pivoted towards something that wasn't in the direction of the career that I was looking for. But I did end up getting connected with someone at Estée Lauder who actually had previously worked at Accenture. So they knew obviously what my background, they had that foundation. They knew how useful it could be at the company. And so I got connected for this job at basically an internal consulting org within Estée Lauder Companies. So from a skill perspective, it was all the exact same stuff I had been doing. But from an industry perspective, I got to start doing the beauty thing. And so it was a very sort of nice step change into the industry because it wasn't like, oh, all of a sudden you're a beauty marketer with zero experience in marketing, zero experience in beauty. It was like, okay, all of a sudden you're in the beauty industry, but you're doing the exact same sort of consulting skill set just internally at the Estée Lauder Companies. I see it as a major pivot or major turning point, but also just kind of a stepping stone because it wasn't, if you look, even what I'm doing today from what I was doing then 5 years ago, it's very different. I was still doing sort of this project-based work. I was still doing process design, org design, all that kind of stuff. But I was really lucky because I got put on a project that was actually all about how our brands at Estée Lauder go to market, how the beginning to end sort of launch process for a product till it hits the shelves. It was about process design and process efficiency within that existing go-to-market process. So I got to learn all about what it takes to bring a product to market within sort of the safety and bounds of the skill set that I already had. So I was able to sort of prove that I had one skill while also learning another skill. It was really exciting to finally be in the industry that I wanted to be in, but it was still not exactly the subject matter that I wanted to be in. I was still so excited about beauty, so wanted to be part of the process of actually being in the business and bringing ideas to life and putting them on a shelf at a Sephora.
There was a few pivots. And so you pivoted, yes, away from management consulting. And then you did it in a way that made sense. And in the industry, you got your foot in the door.
Exactly. I mean, and that's the thing. I think sometimes when you think about switching careers, switching industries, et cetera, people do want to do like a total 180. But sometimes there's a step along the way, right? And to get to where you want to go, you have to prove yourself at each step so that you can get there. And there's nothing wrong with that, because had I just been expected to do the job I do today after coming out of consulting, I would have failed. I wouldn't have had enough experience. Maybe I would have figured it out. Maybe I'm not giving myself enough credit, but I wouldn't have been able to do it as successfully, I think, without having that experience and being able to find my way in a safe space. Because you're allowed to make mistakes at work, but if you make mistakes all the time, then people don't want to work with you. You have to be able to excel in some way and prove yourself in some way so that people want to continue to take chances on you. And I'm not sure that I would have gotten people taking chances on me in these points throughout if I hadn't at least had something to hold on to say, I am good at my job. I do provide value. I can learn, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, I love that you highlighted that. That's something that comes up a lot in client conversation, where sometimes we have this idea, I'm just going to completely pivot, just quit the job and go for my dream. And I believe in what you just said, that there's this process, this creating additional skill set. I wouldn't be able to do the coaching I do today without first kind of taking it slow. I couldn't have just jumped into what I'm doing right now. I had to learn more about it, had to get the training, I had to become good at it. And so I love that you highlighted that. I like to tell clients sometimes it's like hopping from one place to another place and then another position or another role, and then hopping from that to what you really want to do. But it's not just one huge jump. It's usually like little hops.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, even from there was still another job in between where I am today and what I was just talking about. From that job, I went into a brand strategy role where I was sort of doing brand strategy, brand building, brand marketing across a cluster of our brands at the company. So I was sort of dipping in and dipping out of different brands that were sort of in our purview. It was MAC, it was Too Faced, it was Smashbox, it was Tom Ford, it was Clinique. In that role, I really got to start to see the business versus sort of this back office consulting type of role, while getting exposed to so many different projects and facets of so many different brands, that it really allowed me to sort of broaden my knowledge of what different types of product launches look like, what different brand voices look like, how does one individual brand differentiate itself from another brand in the market, and how are they doing that from the very beginning when they're talking about a product, a formula, a package. That's a very different conversation for one brand than it is for another brand. And then taking that all the way to market, and then how are you activating it in the marketplace? What consumer are you trying? It's so multifaceted. This was probably the biggest skill gap or skill jump, I want to say, from joining in beauty. The experience that I got in that role, for a long time, it felt like drinking from a hose. And I had even at that point already been working in beauty for like a year and a half. So it wasn't like, oh, this is my first day working in beauty. I had already been exposed through my last role, but just even that pivot was extreme. For a long time, I felt really uncomfortable. And then finally, I remember it started to click and my opinion started to matter. Not that it didn't matter before, but I felt very confident in giving my opinion in these conversations and being part of the brainstorming process and that kind of stuff. It really taught me how to think differently in a way that I had never done in my career before, or maybe never just even been empowered to do. It just wasn't part of the equation before, to sort of think creatively in that way. It was just all very business and very problem solving, which is still part of the job. That more creative way of thinking was something that I really had zero experience doing before and had to completely build out in that role. And then finally, that's what led me to the job that I'm in now in marketing for Too Faced. So it was a journey, to your point, and there were stepping stones along the way. And I think each of them were very important.
I love that. Stepping stones. Yes. So what you just said actually brought up a few things that I want to highlight. One is that a change, a pivot like this, a big one like this, takes time. So if someone's listening and wanting to make a pivot, not thinking that I'm going to be doing what I love, what I dream about. I mean, maybe some people do. For most people, it can take time to build up the skill set, to get to the right opportunities, to build the right relationships. Because that whole process from when you started to when you accepted this role, how long did that take?
11 years.
Yeah.
A long time. I mean, it depends who you ask. But like for people who are just starting or maybe 5 years in, that sounds like a long time. If you would have
Yeah.
told me when I graduated college that it was going to take 11 years to get to where I wanted to be, I would have said, well, why even bother? That sounds so long. But on the other side, I can tell you that almost every year of that experience was important. Sometimes I have like
Mm,
a little bit of regret of how long I stayed in consulting. I think I could have left maybe a little bit earlier before it got so urgent that I needed to leave. I probably could have left 2 years before. But overall,
mm,
I needed every piece of that to get to where I am today.
yeah. I always like to think of that Steve Jobs quote that talks about looking back, you can always connect the dots. For me, coaching, my experience in public accounting, my experience in a corporate oil and gas setting, that has been very helpful for working with clients. It helps me understand, it helps me put myself in their shoes. It helps me be a better coach because I can understand different aspects of that. And I couldn't have been as great of a coach right out of college. It wouldn't have.
You wouldn't have had the experience
Right.
or perspective.
Right. Another thing that I wanted to highlight was that I've had a lot of entrepreneurs on the podcast. So people who started their own business, who love what they do. And one of the reasons I was so excited about having you on is that you are doing what you love. I was talking to you the other day and you said, I love my job. And you're doing it. It's a different perspective from an entrepreneur. And you're doing it at a major company, one of the biggest in the country, in an industry you love. You are one of the most confident women I know. Beautiful, a
She's
mom.
flattering me, you guys. If you're not watching the video, she's just buttering me up for maybe some very difficult question she's about to ask, but I'll answer
No,
it.
no. And so I think that's a wonderful perspective to have on the podcast, and that we don't have to quit our job and start our own thing to find what we love. But that's not always a path. And so, not to say that, I don't know, maybe one day you do. I don't know. I would love to hear kind of your perspective, your thoughts on that.
Just something I'm thinking of while we're talking about that. My husband does own his own business. Not to say that I for sure would have started my own, and because of that, I haven't. But he's been doing what he loves in his own business for about the same time that I've been in beauty. It's been about the same time frame.
And I've actually had Rachel's husband on the podcast, Adam Green. So if you
Yes.
want to listen to that
Go
episode.
listen. Yes, exactly. Little cross promo here. When you're in a partnership like that, there is a voice in the back of your mind that's like, well, one of us has to have a stable job, right? I'm not saying that because of that, I haven't gone and tried to do something on my own, because we've talked about this before as well. While that may be on my mood board for some day, right now I'm very happy where I am. But he was off taking the chance on doing his own thing. And I was taking a different kind of chance, doing something new, but in this safe space that allowed us to have some stability in our home life. One of us had a steady paycheck. One of us had health insurance. These are important things that
Yes.
I think people, when they're going off on their own, don't necessarily think about. All this logistical and maintenance things that being at a big company can kind of provide for you. And I don't think there's a wrong answer. I think you can go follow your dream on your own, or you can go follow your dream within the bounds of a big company. And to be honest with you, aside from Adam doing his own thing, I don't really think it was even a choice in my mind that maybe I should go do my own thing if I can't get a job in beauty. Maybe had I been pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and not been able to find the job that I found, who knows? Maybe I would have considered doing that. But that would have been at that point in time really, really hard. I had absolutely no experience. I think the only option probably would have been to do some sort of creator influencer type of thing, which would have been a huge risk on its own. And I think it's really, at the end of the day, your level of risk aversion, right? I did not have a high risk tolerance. I had been in a super steady, very predictable consulting job for many years. And I don't think I would have been able to pull the rug out from under myself at that point in time and said, oh, now I'm just going to do a free for all and get on my Instagram and teach people how to do eyeliner. Even today, even though that sounds like something so much more feasible today, because I already do that, but I just don't get paid for it. Even today, that sounds like a huge risk. And so maybe that's the message, is like, you have to listen to what your risk tolerance is and your desire to do what you want to do, but also feel supported in that. And for some people, the best decision is to go out on their own and create something around them. And I applaud those people when I see people like Adam or like you just out there doing what you love and creating your own thing. I find it so amazing and so admirable. I also think it's totally fine or more than fine to find that path within the support system of a small or big company. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, because I can tell you that even though I work for a company and not myself, I go into work every single day and I love my job, and it never feels like work ever. It always feels like the most fun I've ever had. And I never thought I could feel that way about work. I never imagined, I heard people kind of talk about it, but it always felt like this sort of urban legend. But now that I'm in it, it's like, oh my God, it can be true. And it doesn't matter how you find that. It doesn't matter where you find that. No choice is, I think, better than the other. Because at the end of the day, your happiness is the most important thing.
Oh, I love that so much, Rachel. I loved how transparent you were about that, what your thought process was. I think sometimes media or social media can promote, go off and start your own thing or whatever. Like that's always the better thing. And I agree with you completely that there's no right or wrong. There's no better or worse. It's finding what you love to do and being excited. I love hearing that you're excited that work doesn't feel like work. That is so inspiring to me. I think people are going to find that inspiring too as they listen to you. Oh, well, that opens up a whole lot of possibilities. What could I do? Because sometimes I've heard this in client conversations. Well, there's nothing that I could find to do in my role. Okay, well, maybe that means a different industry. Using what I have, getting my foot in the door. It opens up our mind to think about what could I create for myself that gives me what I want and that allows me to find happiness. As cheesy as that sounds.
No, I think that's right. And I think the path will sort of find you, right? An opportunity will come about, or you'll finally reach a breaking point that you'll decide you want to take a risk to do something on your own, or some combination thereof. It's about trusting the process and continuing to bang your head against the wall, even though in the moment it's like, oh my God, how am I going to keep doing this? But I think that's what pushes some people up to the front of the line and others not. You can't give up. At some point, you're going to find something, whether it's an opportunity that's presented to you or you creating something for yourself. But you can't quit, because if you quit, then you never will get there, right? Because the most valuable thing is time. And the more time that you can put into something, eventually something is going to present itself, or you're going to work towards something that's going to give that to you. But if you don't put in the work and you don't put in the time, you're never going to get there. You can't just expect something to fall into your lap, because that's not going to happen. Maybe it's going to happen, I don't know, for 1% of people, but for the most part, that's never going to happen. And it's totally on you to figure that out for yourself. But once you do, you can be really happy.
Well, another thing that I wanted to make sure I asked you about was, again, you're one of the most confident women I know. I love that about you.
Maybe too confident. My husband says I'm overconfident. He's like, you're always saying something is true and you don't know the answer. I say, that's consulting for you. You tell people that's the truth and they'll probably believe you.
Many of us, including myself, could use some more of that energy. How do you keep yourself in that state? Is it something that comes to you naturally? Is it something you work on? Because I imagine that's also been a factor in your success, the way you are willing to learn, the way you carry yourself in a way that exudes confidence.
I think it's a little bit of both. It's definitely my personality to be very sort of outgoing and outspoken. What I always say about what I learned so much from consulting is you have to know enough to be dangerous. So like, if I know nothing, I'm not saying anything. I can't get out there and have an opinion about the latest glitter eyeshadow if I don't know anything about glitter eyeshadow. But if I can sit in 1 or 2 meetings where I hear the experts talk about it, and I can glean a few salient points, put that together with sort of the magic of having a little bit of confidence, then I can talk about it. And I'm not saying I'm going to go tell you to make a game-changing decision that's going to shake up your whole business or whatever, but like I can have enough of an opinion to be dangerous. And that's always sort of been my ethos throughout my career. Learn enough so that you can have enough confidence to state your opinion, and hopefully it's a good one. And by the way, if it's not, that's okay. How many people in the room are full of hot air and literally don't know what they're talking about? I don't know. I feel like everyone sort of has that experience throughout their career where you're sitting in the room in a meeting and someone starts saying something. You're like, what is this person talking about? I have no idea. It's coming out of left field. It makes no sense. There's always going to be someone else wrong in the room. If you're wrong, a few times, that's okay too. And just having that confidence that if not every single thing that you say is perfect, that's okay too. Because if you have the confidence, a lot of what you say and you have the knowledge, enough knowledge to be dangerous, it's going to land. A lot of that confidence, I think, was built in consulting and having to quickly pick up on things that I knew nothing about. One day I was doing wealth management. The next day I was doing loan origination, things that I had no knowledge of at all, had to learn enough to be able to have a salient conversation with a client. So that was huge. And then in my role, in the strategy role, that's where I started to have to get the confidence to have those more creative opinions. And I had to sort of like relearn the entire skill set. I already had it, but it was very fact-based and problem-solving based. I had the confidence to have an opinion, but then I had to sort of pivot it again because the opinion now had to be a creative one, a brand building one, a shake up the conversation kind of one, which was totally different than what I was used to having before. So that was when I talked about having to like gain the confidence and drinking out of a fire hose. It used that same personality trait that I had, but it was a totally different conversation. But eventually you get it, and eventually you start having some good ideas, and then people get excited about it. Even to this day, I'll say stuff, and when it lands, I'm surprised. We were just in a brainstorm last week for one of our launches coming for next year, and we were trying to figure out what the campaign idea was going to be. And we were sitting, it was a bunch of us sitting there kind of brainstorming, and how are we going to make our people relate to this? And we were having a hard time. It was like a tricky sell. And eventually I just said something and people were like, oh, that makes sense. And I was like, oh, does it? But just being able to be part of the conversation and having the confidence to throw something out there, even if it's not 100%, it takes practice, but it's a really good skill to have. It will definitely, to your point, move things forward.
Being willing to get in there and almost like play. Like if you're playing tennis, get it, not just watching from the sidelines, but actually getting in there and trying to hit the ball. And not that I'm a sports person, I'm trying to learn tennis. But
no, but totally. You have to be willing to fall down. You have to be willing to be wrong. It's okay. These things are okay. If you're wrong every single day, yeah, that's not going to work. You have to know enough to start being right sometimes, but you don't have to be right every time. And if you're just quiet, then no one will hear you.
So Rachel, what would you say to someone listening who's getting excited, who's like, maybe I can do this, maybe I can pivot, or maybe they're in a job that's okay, that's fine, but they're like, I want to love the work I do. What do you want to say to that person?
Number one is be patient, because no single person's path is the same. And I think it's really easy to see people doing what they love or even performing that they do what they love. By the way, everything on the internet is fake. Take everything with a grain of salt, number one. Number two is be patient, because you may see someone doing something that they love, but you don't know what it took for them to get there, and you don't know what they sacrificed to get there, and you don't know how actually happy they are. So I would just say focus on your own journey and trying to get where you want to go. And every step in the right direction, even if it's a small one, is in the right direction. It doesn't have to be on day one, I'm an accountant, and on day two, I'm getting a Grammy. You can slowly get to where you want to go, and that's okay. And by the way, doing it at that speed is probably going to make you better at your job instead of just throwing you in with the wolves and like trying to dig your way out. Building up your own skills in a meaningful way will give you confidence to start to move in the right direction as well, versus if you're just sort of thrown in there. That's hard, especially if you're around a bunch of people who've been doing it for a long time. You're going to have a harder time finding that voice and finding that confidence. But if you're doing things that are sort of slowly progressing, like if you think about like a clock ticking or something, instead of just like a complete 180, you're going to be able to build your skills and find your confidence in a lot more sustainable way.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I know this is going to resonate with people. How can people find more about you or learn more about you or follow along?
So you can follow on my Instagram. I post beauty stuff all the time, whether it's from work or from just my own personal passions. You can follow me on Instagram and on TikTok, really Rachel Green. I'll teach you how to do your eyeliner. And you can find more about my career journey on LinkedIn, Rachel Kleinman Green. But yeah, and if anyone has questions or wants to DM me, please do. I love talking about my job and that kind of stuff and giving advice. So please feel free to reach out.
And actually, that makes me think of one more question, Rachel, before we sign off. You have told me in the past not to be scared of makeup. And you're one of the most knowledgeable, like you said earlier, you have your hand on the pulse, or is it finger on the pulse?
Finger on the pulse.
Finger on the pulse. You know what's going on. You're always in the know. What would you say to someone who's listening who wants to start trying makeup? Because I know this is your passion. This is something that for someone like me I have my very basic routine. I'm afraid sometimes to try things. What would you say to that person who's kind of like, I'd like to play with more makeup, but I don't know if I'm there yet?
I mean, makeup, I think, is the most exciting form of self expression that exists in the world. I mean, I'm biased, obviously, but I just think it is the most fun and easy way to make yourself into whoever you want to be for the day. You can be like glam girl one day, you can be clean girl another day, you can be glitter party girl. It just allows you to open up so much creativity for yourself and express yourself in ways that maybe you hadn't thought about before, channel energy that maybe you didn't really know how to express or whatever. I just love that you can be whoever you want through makeup. And I just think that's where people should be coming from versus, oh, I'm trying to make myself look a certain way or present myself a certain way or whatever. I think if you think of it more as a form of self-expression, then that takes away some of the fear and, oh, well, if I don't do my eyeliner exactly this way, then it's not going to look good. Or if I don't put my blush like in this exact right spot, however you decide to express yourself on your face is cool. And no one's going to judge you for it. By the way, I'm not ever walking around being like, oh, that girl's makeup looks horrible. Like it's just not. And I'm someone who's looking at that, So if I, a makeup person, am not sitting around tacking off one by one whose makeup looks good, whose makeup looks bad, a regular person sure is not doing that. But I think aside from having that mentality of makeup is expression, the best thing you can do is practice. I didn't used to be good at my makeup, but I practice things every single day that I want to learn. I was telling Lupe a few days ago, I saw this liner on TikTok that I thought was the coolest liner I ever saw. And for 5 days in a row, I practiced it with my liquid liner in my bathroom. And on the first day, it looked okay. And on the last day, it looked awesome. And so it's really just learning what the makeup technique is and applying it to your face. And maybe that sounds intimidating, but if you're practicing in the privacy of your own home, you don't even have to go out and look. Sometimes when I'm practicing makeup, I do it right before I wash my face before bed. So it's just this no pressure kind of situation. I don't have to, I'm not in a rush trying to go somewhere and my makeup looks not how I want it to look or whatever. I'll do it right before I go to bed and then I'll wash it off. And then the next day I'll try it again. And then eventually you figure out how to do it. I'm not out here saying, oh, everyone's going to be able to do like a Euphoria makeup with glitter and rhinestones and have the advanced skill of a makeup artist, but everyone can learn makeup tricks that make them feel more confident, make them feel like they're expressing their truest self through their makeup. So I think it's just about having the confidence that no one's really looking, teaching yourself in a safe environment where you don't feel pressure to have it look perfect. And it's just playing. It's not that deep. It's just playing. And when you start looking at it like that, and every day is a new day and every day is a new face. And if you don't like what you did yesterday, you can do something different tomorrow. It's just having that playful mentality about it instead of, I have to get this smoky eye exactly right, or it's not going to look right for my meeting. And no, like today I'm going to do a pink eyeshadow look. And if I hate it, tomorrow I'm not going to do it. Today I'm going to practice my eyeliner and then I'm going to practice it again. And then I'm going to practice it again. And eventually I'm going to figure it out.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. This was so fun.